start by introducing myself, I guess. So, hello everyone, welcome to the first EEP Alumni Network Life After EEP event for this academic year. I am Hope Hua. I am the liaison between the EEP Alumni Network and EEP Club, and I will be one of the moderators for this event today. And joining me in moderating this event is Sasha.
Hello, so my name is Sasha. I am a first year. I am the YouTube chair of the EEP Club, and I will also be moderating and facilitating this meeting with Hope.
Okay, and now for our panelists, if you guys could give us a brief refresher of who you are and what you do. So let's start off with your name, major and graduation year, current occupation, and maybe something interesting about yourself.
I'll jump in. I'm James Walker. Graduated in 2001 with a bachelor's in geology and 2004 with a master's in geology, both from Cal State LA. I work for the State Department of Water Resources out of the Glendale, California office. And I like to tinker and fix electronics in my spare time. Just trying to teach myself new soldering skills and electronic skills.
I'm Daniel Tamai. I graduated EEP in 2001 with James. I majored in biochemistry. I'm currently an assistant professor of biochemistry at Cal State Northridge. Interesting fact about myself, my parents named me after the late, great Senator Daniel K. Inouye from Hawaii, who dedicated his life. He was injured serving in World War II and dedicated his life to public service. So my mom really admired him, so named me after him.
I'll go next. My name is Amy Watt. I am currently a postdoc at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, which is a Department of Energy funded government research facility. I went to Cal State LA from 2006 to 2012 and got a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, and then went off to do an internship at the Department of Energy's Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory before starting graduate school in material science and engineering over in University of California, Berkeley. And I graduated in 2018. And yeah, a fun fact about myself, I started picking up a new instrument during shelter in place. So I've been taking lessons on how to play the guzheng, which is a Chinese zither. It's like this 26-string instrument that's basically, like, I would call it a Chinese harp for anyone who's not familiar with the koto or the zither. So yeah.
Hey everyone, I'm David Siegel. Graduated from EEP in 2010, which is crazy. It's been time flies. So I started. Amy's shaking her head at me. I studied finance and economics and a minor in math. Then I got a master's in finance from Claremont McKenna, and I started working in the private sector. And I've been working in finance for the last 9 years, and I actually just gave notice to my job yesterday, and I'm starting a new job managing a global REIT fund in about a month, which I'm really looking forward to. And my fun fact, I guess, usually my fun fact is, I skipped high school, but that's not special around here. So I guess my fun fact is I'm a huge fan of history, and lately I've been on the World War I bend. Just watched 1917, Beneath Hill 60, and been reading The Guns of August, and yeah, huge fan of history.
What a broad panel we have today. So now Sasha will begin asking some questions relating to graduation and post-graduation and other stuff revolving around that.
Yes. So our first question will be, what preparations did you make before graduation? And some preparations, maybe some examples would be like some pre-graduate exams or like courses you took or experiences.
All right, so I have a long answer for this one. I came into EEP knowing that I wanted to go into a PhD program. And so I did everything I could to look into what resources there were through Cal State and Cal State LA to learn more about that system, right? So they had workshops and all-day symposiums on like how to apply to graduate school with graduate school fairs, where they try to recruit people to go and apply for their graduate programs, and they actually tell you about the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program and other fellowship programs. And I really took advantage of those to try to learn as much as I could about what are some of the opportunities you could have for applying for funding. And that's the thing that I did a lot over the years in Cal State LA, which is apply for pre-doctoral scholarship funds. For example, the Sally Casanova grant that's only for Cal State LA students or Cal State students was a really great one that I applied to. It gave me $3,000 to go towards graduate school applications and any preparation courses that you would take for the GRE, which I don't know if it's as relevant anymore, but it was very relevant when I was applying for those. And it could also be used for the application fees and for trips to go and visit other professors that you might want to work with as a graduate student. And that one also came with a summer internship that really was directly led to where I ended up going to graduate school, since it was a fully funded summer internship and you could use it for whoever you wanted to work with as long as they took you in. Funny thing, that one is funded by the California lottery. So in a way, I won the lottery. I got that one. But that was a really essential tool. And LSAMP for anyone in the sciences is an amazing resource to learn more about how to succeed in the scientific field. So talk to, it used to be Margaret Jefferson, but now I think it's Yamazaki who runs it now. She's great. Talk to them for help.
Right, the LSAMP and the MORE programs are pretty important for a lot of undergrads who are looking to go and pursue a PhD. And I believe the Sally Casanova grant is still going on according to our Cal State LA or Cal State University website. So thank you for those information. And anyone else?
One piece of advice about those, get ready for rejection. You'll get rejected all the time. It is part of it. Nobody knows about them. So just get rejected.
I didn't do any preparation before graduation. I was blissfully ignorant, but I lucked into a job. I didn't even consider my post-graduation plans until about a month before I was going to graduate. And then I realized I need to do something and started applying for jobs. And thankfully, the job market at the time was open enough where I was able to go into work right away. And then I used that period after work to sort of figure out what I wanted to do long term. And so I worked for a year and then returned to graduate school at that point. But I sort of gave myself a bit of a gap year in the workforce before going back for my master's.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who basically had no preparations and tried to figure things out in like the year before I graduated. I wanted to get a PhD in economics, but in order to get a PhD, you kind of need to have like research experience with it. Just like I never like put that together. So I ended up studying for like the GRE and the GMAT, effectively like after graduating. So I had the gap year as well. And then I actually didn't get into any PhD program and ended up going to a master's program. So yeah, expect rejection and deal with it, but also it's not the end of the world. Things can still work out if you choose a slightly different path.
I think I was somewhere in between. I also was not very strategic, but I asked one of the faculty members in the chem department, Dr. Paulson, if I could work in his lab. So several EEPsters, we messed around, we broke a lot of glassware, but we did a little bit of chemistry. And in addition to that, I just talked to faculty, and there were new faculty that were really great at talking to us about careers in research. And so Dr. Ba, who's still in the chem department, he was, I think, a first-year faculty member when I took him, and he mentioned that his wife was at the Beckman Research Institute at City of Hope. So I kind of used my gap year and a half, and I worked as a technician in the lab that Dr. Ba's wife was a senior research fellow. So got a couple papers out of that, and then applied to the PhD program at City of Hope and got in. So it was kind of strategic or semi-strategic, but kind of serendipitous as well. So I would strongly encourage all of you guys to talk to your faculty, especially as a faculty now. Not many students really reach out and ask, about career paths and opportunities. And I think definitely getting good grades helps, but I think especially in this virtual environment, hopefully next semester we go back to more in-person stuff. But the students that come to my office hours, I remember them, and everyone else is a blank screen. So it's hard. I know I was shy as well, but reaching out and talking to faculty that, at Cal State LA, you're blessed. They're really great faculty that really care about you guys. So talk to them. And the one thing that I will add to Amy's long list of good programs, since becoming a faculty, many of our students get these C Superb fellowships and present at C Superb. So these are if your research relates in any way to biotech, and it's not just what you think of like disease-based research. There, agricultural-based research in the biology labs, a whole host of things that touch on biotech, even engineering. Faculty at CSUN have presented and sent students to C Superb. So I was strongly, I just got the email, the poster abstracts are due on Monday, but they have other rolling applications for various fellowships that support students and really want to see you guys in the biotech field and pursue academic careers as well.
Wonderful. So I guess most people have answered if they felt prepared for their desired path after graduation. So I'm going to ask now, what experiences or classes did you feel like prepared you the most for what you ended up doing?
For me, it was working in the laboratory. As an undergraduate, I was able to get some experience with Barry Hibbs in the geology department doing some groundwater sampling, and that was a one-to-one carryover to my eventual career as a geologist, where I was getting hands-on experience that translated directly. A lot of the academic classes gave me a nice scientific foundation for the work that I was doing, but it was all conceptual and didn't apply directly to the work that I ended up doing. But the time that I spent in the lab collecting samples and doing work was great experience and really gave me a heads up advantage over other candidates when I was applying for jobs.
I think that really speaks to the importance of some lab work, and it really helps you not only synthesize the information that you've learned from your core classes, but it also gives you an opportunity to apply them.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who also ended up in the sciences, like doing work in a lab, even if it wasn't really connected or related to what I ended up doing down the line, was good experience because it gave me a really good idea of like the lifestyle that you end up signing up for, the kind of problems that it comes with when you decide to go into the sciences as a lab scientist. Like, you learn pretty early on that your job is mostly to fail. So you're like, most of the time you're going to have more failed experiments than not, but it's about the process of what you learn from it. So learning that really early on gives you a really good idea if that's actually what you want to do. Like, there are other EEPsters who took that experience and took that chance to really get to do lab work to find out, oh no, this is not me at all. I'm going to be a doctor now, or I'm going to be a lawyer now, or any other thing. It's good to learn that earlier than later. And my classes had nothing to do with a lot of the work I ended up doing down the line, because I switched disciplines, but it's more about what you get out of the process of learning. And even if it's not a direct one-to-one thing with what you do right now and what you end up doing later, your past experience will always educate what you do next, and that will always be valuable. You just don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could speak from a finance and business perspective. If there are any current EEPsters who are interested in that route, I have found that most people in the finance and general business world take a very narrow set of classes, and seemingly don't actually take that many classes. So I think taking taking classes in statistics, taking calculus, and learning the ability to problem solve, being able to think through statistics and how to think about numbers, since oftentimes you end up dealing with a lot of data. I find that a lot of the people in the business world, they're not good at math and they're not good at writing, and that those are actually really important skill sets that are shockingly not that prevalent. So I'd actually recommend taking writing classes. It's a rare skill set that actually helps you stand out. Take statistics and econometrics. Being able to be the person who can interpret data and understand if this is material or not, it's pretty valuable. And I always like to see people put calculus on the resume, because even if the job doesn't involve calculus, and very few jobs in business really do, I want to see people who understand how to solve problems and understand certain concepts, like what a second derivative is. So, don't know if anyone's interested in the business route, but
I think those lessons apply to a lot of fields. I mean, especially the writing skills apply in almost every career you can, especially as you advance in your career. I think strong writing skills are undervalued to a certain extent during the academic years, but really come into play later on. And also problem solving in general. I think calculus is a good way to learn and develop your problem solving skills, even if you don't necessarily end up using it down the road.
I agree completely with all three, and so it takes me back to one, I think, senior level course that we had back in the day. It was a writing for chemists class, and it was team taught by a chemist and an English professor who happened to be husband and wife, and we took really poorly written portions of a journal article and we rewrote it to be more clear and concise, and so that has stuck with me. Because there are wonderful scientists, but their writing is so verbose and hard to disentangle that it's really hard to. The science is not hard. It's how it's communicated that makes it unnecessarily difficult to understand. So I think clarity and concise writing and communication, effective communication, is so important and is transferable for any job. I think that will elevate you from other colleagues. And then to Amy's point. Do a lot of stuff, and in pharma, the mantra is fail early and fail often. And so if you do that early on in your career, while you're undergrad, then you know what you don't want to do, and it's not failure of yourself. It's that your toolkit or your passions are not aligned with that thing. So move on, try something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those were really interesting. And a lot of you were pointing out, you took some of the courses that you didn't even really necessarily need for what you're going to go into your profession. So that kind of brings me to my next question. Why did you decide to pursue your profession and the career you're in?
I had no choice. No, it's really I learned about material science through a class in the engineering discipline. We actually had an intro to material science class, and I remember reading the introduction in the textbook, and the idea that materials is what defines so much of human innovation is something that really resonated with me. And I knew that I wanted something that was in engineering and in sciences, and that one just fit the bill so perfectly. And so that's really how I ended up going, oh, this is it. This is what I want to do. And I'm going to do everything I can to get as close as I can to it, despite like not having that discipline being taught at Cal State LA. So that was it for me. Like, it's that sort of, it's ridiculous, but yeah, I kind of figured it out when I was a teenager that that's what I really liked. And like something that really resonates with me is like, part of it is just how like motivated I was to just keep hacking at it. And like, I think that's part of what turns into passion and excitement is just that process of, hey, I picked this thing, I'm going to go straight for it. And I've had some really bad experiences and stuff that really got me to rethink whether or not I wanted to do it. But like, it's part of just growing up and trying to figure out, well, what is it exactly in this field that I want to do? Since once you pick something, you're going to find out there's 10 pathways that you could take with each thing you do. So there's no, it doesn't seem clear until you're looking back.
I think I ended up in geology because I wanted to be outside. I was a business major at first and a geology minor. And after about a year of doing that, I realized that I enjoyed the camping trips and the hikes and everything associated with my geology classes just exponentially more than my accounting and business classes. And so I switched majors and haven't looked back. I mean, that's been one of the benefits of my career is that I have spent, at least for the first half of it, the vast majority of it outdoors on a drill rig, or sampling and just being outside in the sun. And that's one of the parts of my job that I enjoy the most.
I don't have a super interesting answer. I think like finance and economics is both quantitative and qualitative. So it's not as quantitative as engineering, not as qualitative as the humanities, but has a nice blend. And also it's just it's a very pragmatic minded field. So it's like immediately applicable. And yeah, I don't know. I always knew I wanted to study finance and economics. So it was never really a question for me.
I think, every entering EEP class, like everyone is pre-med, right? So all of my friends, all of my colleagues were pre-meds. And so I took all those courses and I loved most of them. I didn't excel at every one of them, but once I got in those lab courses in the upper division parts of chemistry, I loved being in the lab. I loved working, with my hands in the lab. So I think that drew me in, and then serendipitously, I got a taste of different kinds of institutions. Cal State LA, the Beckman Research Institute at City of Hope is more of a quasi-academic. It's not university affiliated, but it has a PhD program. And then at UPenn, it was R1 institution. So I think that's what I would encourage you guys is to have breadth of opportunities and different environments. And then when I was a postdoc at Penn in 2015, I could kind of see the societal and political environment, and I loved doing what I was doing. I was working, kind of in lockstep with pharma, and we collaborated with Johnson & Johnson, worked on their prostate cancer drug. So it was really cutting edge. Work with the top clinicians in the field, but I kind of felt the tug back to the Cal State system and mentoring students and teaching. And so it was not strategic. That's not the goal that I had in mind, but by doing different things and then growing up, I think what you're passionate about and what you really love right now in EEP, it does change. And so for me, it did change. And so I think it's hard to kind of triangulate from now, but go to the best institutions and find the best opportunities. And then you'll have many choices to pick from based on where you're at in the future.
Okay. Wonderful answers, everyone. So The next question is, what do you wish you knew before starting your job or occupation?
I wish I knew about the Department of Energy system, like that whole, like, if you want to go into the sciences and you end up part of the DOE or the DOD, the Department of Defense, there's so much more money for doing research. It's absurd how different it is. As like the grad students get paid way more, their tax burdens is a lot more intense, but they live much better than I did, even with my fellowship in grad school. So definitely, like, really get yourself exposed to that system and get a better idea of how they do research in different environments. Because I was pretty much like academic institutions only. Like, I really just focused on getting as much of the like R1 experiences I could when I was an undergrad, because I wanted to, you know, make my application competitive for the kind of institutions I was planning on applying to for my PhD program. But it really limited my point of view in terms of what opportunities are out there for doing research. Like, we can just drop 60K out of nowhere to buy equipment. That's two graduate students for a year. You know, that's the kind of money that we deal with now, and the way we manage the research changes because of it. And it's a lot nicer in a lot of ways. And then, like, take experiences in industry too. Like, always pay attention to the fact that even as a graduate student and as a student right now, you are in training, you are learning. So take as many opportunities you can to be learning. Like, during grad school, I realized, well, my advisor is running out of funding for me to be his grad student. So he kind of gave me a cutoff to submit my thesis. And so I went, you know what, I'm going to take a break and just go and do an internship in industry while I'm still a student. Because once I graduate, I will never be a student again. And I won't be able to do an internship as easily. And that experience has led directly to some of the projects that I get to do, some of the work that I get to do right now, and really gave me a lot of context for what kind of work life I want. Because working in industry is really different from working in academic work or even government research. So those experiences are just, it's mind-blowing. It wrinkles your brain.
What a great description. It wrinkles your brain. I think that's a very, very great description. Anyone else?
I think I wish I knew about the different career paths that were available for geologists, at least in my industry. I think I lucked out and landed in one that suits me, but I think it would have been useful at the time to really sit down and think about which direction I wanted to take my career in. And there were a lot of different paths that I could have chosen if I had spent the time looking into them. So I kind of wish I had spent that time considering it. In the end, it worked out for the best, but it would have been better to be prepared up front.
Yeah. Again, I can only speak from like my own experience of like working in the finance world. The phrase that you always hear is that it's about your connections and who you know when you're looking for another job, another role. And so on one hand, yes, of course, you know that going into the field, literally everyone will tell you it's about networking. But I'm still, like, to this day, like, shocked by how I spent like 6 months in the job hunting process, and basically all the jobs I would actually want were things that came to me through my network. Actually applying to something like without a contact is seemingly entirely pointless. So it's so much about who your former coworkers are, who you went to school with, who do you personally know. Like, network is really just everything, for better and for worse.
I wish I knew that because we're in EEP, you have the luxury of time and I wish I had done something outside the box, like studied abroad for like a year. You know, I think we're all in a rush. We're all driven people, or you feel that social pressure too, because you look around and all the EEPsters are that way. But on a text thread with all my old EEP buddies, James knows them, Chris, Steve, Ronnie, Alex, we wish we had done something kind of more outside the box. And because, once you get in that postdoc, or once you are, in a job, or once you have kids, you don't have that leeway as much. You can still do it, but it's a little bit harder. So right now is the prime of your life in terms of those kinds of opportunities. Do something outside the box. So that, I think that gets into, seeking out opportunities and talking to people and networking, and those kinds of things open those things up. So I would seek out those types of opportunities.
Yeah. And like on the networking point, yes, your network changes so much about the opportunities that you have. I just name drop my former advisor, and I watch people get starstruck, and that opens doors for me, like double doors open. And like, I think you kind of have to think of networking as just making friends. Make friends with the people that you want to work with. Like, networking is sort of this adult term for what you're really doing, which is just making connections and just being like nice to be around. That's the reason why people want to hire all these other people, is just because they like being around them and think they'd be good to work with. And being good to work with is just like, it just means like turning your stuff in on time, showing up, and like not being a jerk when someone has to give you bad news. So just make friends. That's really essentially what it is, and be ready to ask for what you need. That's how you use your network. That's what it means. It's just asking for help. And on that note about take your time, notice that all of us here actually took a gap year before we actually went back to school. Like, that is something that you can do. And I say it's a great way to also just explore more before you make decisions. Going to grad school is like if you're in a PhD program, is a 5 to 6 years commitment, and hopefully with the same advisor. If you have to switch advisor, that happens, but it's a lot of work and a lot more burden on you. So like, take the time to really kind of figure yourself out, feel out how you like to work and what kind of environment you like to be in. You'll be happier for it.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that the goal ultimately?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you all so much. And yeah, I think like you were saying, like, there should be a balance of having a really good personality and being kind and working with people, and being really good at your job and passionate about your job. So there is a question in the YouTube chat, and it says, for those who are still attempting to find their academic passion, the prospect of even starting to search for what's fulfilling can be very daunting. What advice do you have to kickstart that process?
Be bad at something. You're going to be bad at it no matter what, because it's your first time doing something. So just pick something to try and be bad at it for a bit. And if you're okay with being bad at it long enough to actually be proficient enough to teach someone else, then that's good. But if you never find yourself getting to that point, and you'll have to rely on people with more experiences than you, like someone who is mentoring you, someone who's teaching you how to do a technique. If you find that you can't hit the point that you want to be at, within like a few months or something, or if you talk to them and they're telling you, hey, maybe this isn't your thing, that's okay. Just move on to the next thing. You're young, talented, smart enough to drop out of high school to go to college and get an advanced degree. So like, just be okay with being bad at stuff, and just pick something to be bad at.
Yeah, I'd say just speak to as many people as you can. speak to former EEPsters, speak to the professors, speak to other people who you know, and ask them, ask them for their career story. Usually, like when you just like reach out to someone and say like, hey, I want to like hear like, why did you major in this field? What did you do, after college, and how did it lead to where you are now? Like, just ask them like to walk through the life story. Usually, people are very receptive to that, and you'll get to hear like what they liked, what they didn't like, and hear about like what their day to day is like. Ask doctors about that, ask lawyers about that, ask former hedge fund people about that, and you'll find out what sounds interesting to you. And yeah, I think you get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of time out of that. Having a 30-minute conversation with someone versus taking. The other thing I'd recommend is taking a survey course and take a biology class, take a creative writing class, and see like what tickles your fancy. That's a little bit of a bigger commitment, and it's kind of gets like it's a bit of networking as well. Reach out to people, find someone who's doing something that seems interesting to you.
Oh yeah, David's giving you a min-max answer for how to use your time. A real finance guy right there, knows how to manage his resources.
Gotta optimize.
I'd also add, don't be afraid about starting something and then realizing it's not the right thing. That's what ended up happening to me with business path, and I don't regret that at all. The university will always encourage you to pick something and run it through to completion because they have incentives to get students to graduate as soon as possible. But I took 6 years to graduate. It was fine. It worked out great. If you pick something that sounds like it might be interesting and then it turns out it's not, then again, it comes back to the advantage we have of starting so young, is that you can then just change gears and you'll still be ahead of the game in the long run.
Okay, so the next question is kind of, what do you do in your daily occupation? And can you give us a brief explanation of what you do and just like a summary of your day-to-day life?
Well, I think Daniel had an answer for the previous question too.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I wasn't going to add too much to the previous question. I think the main thing is that I see this in a lot of my students as well, that there's this activation energy to get started or to try something. And I think that's part of like EEPsters and really driven students, that they overanalyze things. And I encourage you guys to also just do something and start it and kind of feel your way out, and also seek good mentors. I think for me, finding good mentors, in addition to helping you with your craft, I think also kind of coach you and nudge you in different ways, when you encounter adversity. So I think I've had several key moments in every step of the way, undergrad, graduate, and postdoc, where, there were a couple of, publication didn't get accepted or grant didn't get funded, as Amy said, serial failure, but you see the stack of rejections on, esteemed faculty's desk as well. And I think that pushes you through. So I think don't get in your own way. I think that would be my mantra. Just try something.
Okay, sorry about that. So what do you do in your daily life and occupation?
So as a geologist, it varies based on whether I'm working in the field or drilling or working in the office. But for field work, usually I'll supervise a drilling crew who advance boreholes down to target depths. We collect soil or groundwater samples. I log the soil in accordance with industry standards, and then package everything up and ship samples off to the lab. In the office, I'll take the data that we generate during field work and synthesize that and take a look at it and try and turn it into sort of a useful story to tell based on the goals at hand, whether it's a construction project that needs to understand the geotechnical qualities of the soil that we're drilling through, or whether in my previous career as an environmental scientist, understanding the distribution and fate and transport of chemicals that are contaminating soil or groundwater, and where they're going, who they're impacting, and what's happening. And then sort of synthesizing all that into a story for our clients, whether that was private industry or regulators in my previous career, or now to the citizens of California in my current career as a geologist.
So the job that I just quit is working as a director of research for one of the country's largest private owners of real estate. My role is to advise our portfolio managers on what type of real estate we should be buying and selling. So we have multiple different mandates and different funds where we own apartment buildings and office buildings and data centers and RV parks and hotels and whatnot. And I help our portfolio managers decide is this what we want to invest in? Is what do we do with the properties that we currently own? Should we reinvest in them? Should we sell them? And I actually really enjoy the investment process. It's both quantitative and qualitative. You think about, you can crunch the numbers, but you also want to think about, what's the longer term trend, and that's going to be a little less quantitative and a little more trying to understand what's happening with the realignment of global supply chains and how is that going to impact the demand for warehouse space. Whether that's, it means you need to shift your allocations from owning warehouses in the Inland Empire to maybe you want to own warehouses in Savannah, Georgia, and that's the type of types of questions I love thinking about and discussing with people. And the role I'm going to take on is also an investment job. It's going to be in the public market space though, and that's where most of my experience is. I previously worked in equity research and at a hedge fund. I'm now going to be working at essentially a large mutual fund company, and just be managing a portfolio investing in stocks where I get to meet with management teams and crunch the numbers on those companies and think through how to allocate to different property types and different companies. So yeah.
So academic positions are split into three pillars, right? It's teaching, it's research, and it's service. So teaching is pretty self-explanatory. Research, day-to-day is I'm supervising students in the lab. You're writing proposals to ask for money to fund your research. So I have NIH funding for my lab. And then, writing papers and analyzing the data and synthesizing the data as well. And then service, that's the one thing that you have no idea until you're in it. And there's so many committees and so many variety of things that I think when you're on the student side, I never knew what faculty did, on that end. So, but I think it's a good opportunity to meet different faculty from other departments. You're no longer in your own little hole, and then you see how the university is a business, and you got to balance your books at the end of the day. And so there are things and decisions that are made that are way above your pay grade, but you see kind of the mechanics behind that as well. So it's interesting, but it's also time consuming.
Yeah. In the national lab system, basically I have a responsibility to not only balance all the scientific and technical work that we have to do for the national security needs, since the Lawrence Livermore National Lab is funded by the National Nuclear Security Administration. So there's a lot of work on that side, and that's what funds a really significant part of the lab and the work in my group. So there's this part of doing the technical work to make sure we have the experiments and we build the data that we need to understand what we're making, what we're building, and what we have there. But there's also a really big need in the Department of Energy to actually just be able to recruit workforce and train our workforce so we have the like top-notch scientific expertise. So we still have to do all the work that like an academic would do when it comes to doing research, like synthesizing all this into publications and being ready for presentations, and to stay like visible on what we call the outside, which is with academic institutions and industry. I still do committee work. So recently, I organized a symposium for for an international material science research conference that draws 4,000 people. Or I also became a chair of a working group to try to make our conferences more accessible for people with disabilities. So there's still this component to my work. But finally, since like there's also like levels of information that we have to manage, with like information that we have to keep as essentially like a trade secret within our organization, versus information that we can distribute to externally and to like research publications. There's this whole nother layer of the work that I have to do, which is just managing information. Like, if I want to publish something, I have to put it through an internal system to see if it's okay to be published externally, and things like that. So it's a lot of like, you have to put on a lot of hats instead of doing the work to try to figure out how to mentor a massive amount of students like Daniel does, which sounds wonderful, by the way. I end up putting that time into making sure that I keep the national security interests at mind when I think about how I talk about my work, for example. So yeah. But again, because of that, I get to do some really big science in a way that like I get to collaborate with companies and with other national labs and with academics on a level that I never could before. And that there's a more direct connection with the research that I do to something that could end up in the real world, because of how we actually assess and judge our research according to how ready it is for industry and for mass production. So yeah, it's neat. It's kind of different.
Mm-hmm.
Amy, do you interact with other federal agencies or DoD or other? Does your job take you in those directions?
Oh yeah, like we schedule symposiums with people at the Air Force Research Laboratory, and I actually just did a review for a Department of Defense early research career grant. I reviewed a proposal for them. So like just being part of the like government research family, I think gets you more exposure to what are like the national research priorities are. Yeah. And so it makes those collaborations a little easier.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for those descriptions. They sounded very interesting. It's kind of like opening a whole new perspective of seeing these jobs. So my next question is, what do you enjoy most about your occupation, and what do you dislike most about it?
Sure. So, what I really enjoy is that I love the process of investing and getting to pick investments and manage money, and I have a huge impact. And it's I get to take a pretty holistic approach. I get to I cover like the real estate industry, and it's a pretty far-reaching industry because there's there's housing, there's the office environment, touch on healthcare through medical offices and life sciences, touch on like what's happening in the retail industry. So I get to like cover a lot of what's happening in the world and keeping on top of the business world. I just find it a lot of fun to understand business models and how trends are changing. That's what I enjoy. The downside is that I'll tell you, like relative to, I think most teachers take a more academic route, getting PhDs, going to pre-med, pre-law. Whereas, I'm kind of the black sheep. I got a 1-year master's degree, and I'll tell you what, I'll believe in the business world and finance world. They're not academically minded. They're not intellectually curious. I've been relatively fortunate in the places I worked for most of my career, except for my most recent job, where you just don't find very many or hardly any people who are curious about the world, people who read books or the newspaper or any news. It's that's the downside. Like I think as an EEPster, like, you're very intellectually curious, and most will continue into jobs like being a professor or working for the Department of Energy, where you will always be learning, and that is your prerogative. You want to be advancing the limits of human knowledge. But I'll tell you, like, that's actually kind of rare among people. Most people aren't actually into that, are not lifelong learners, and are just putting in the hours to do their job. And I think it can be tough to like find people who are like EEPsters, at least in the parts of the business world, or at least the parts that I've kind of been in. So something to keep in mind.
I mean, I still hate meetings. even if they were all smart and interesting people who are lifelong learners. And that's something that David and I have talked about, just how many meetings we have in our work lives now. So
just minimize the number of meetings in your life. That just needs to happen.
Yeah, so I mean, I like talking to them, and like, there's since COVID, we actually had to make all of our meetings virtual, like this basically, except there's not even video because of the way the Department of Energy is set up. We actually don't have cameras on any of our computers. So I'm really just talking to like a box with initials on it most of the time. And then staring at a PowerPoint while talking about the PowerPoint. So that's not my favorite thing. And the amount of bureaucracy that you kind of have. The bureaucracy that you go through in Cal State LA, it's more normal than you'd like to think. There's some places that's more efficient at certain things. Like if you've ever had to order something for your research in a lab through Cal State LA, it takes months. It's a little faster in other research institutions, but there's other ways that you get a lot of administrative work. And so the meetings and the administrative work are my least favorite parts of the job. My favorite parts are, of course, like the people that I'm around. Like, I am fortunate that now I'm in a working environment where I think everybody's curious and everybody's like actually very invested in trying to support each other and our growth in terms of how we learn and how we kind of get to succeed in our career. As I think in the place I work in right now, there's no motivation for anybody to try to compete with you. It's more of a collaborative environment. So finding that for me makes like going to work so much easier and so much more fun. Because that feeds into like how much more fun it is to just rant about this annoying thing that I had to do, or brag about this awesome accomplishment I got. Like being around people that I actually like talking about that stuff with makes a world of a difference. And so that's one of my favorite things about it right now. So finding that group is important for me. And also they're like all the learning I get to do, but I kind of assume that you already can figure that out.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like the best kind of experience and like workplace. I feel like that's kind of what is happening right now in the EEP program, and it makes it so much better just talking to people, relating, and then doing like your work together. So. Mm-hmm.
Grading is the worst part of my job. I hate grading. And I've started getting that on my evaluation. I think I procrastinate on it and I put it off. And so that's the worst. And the best thing are the people. So your colleagues in a Cal State system, they're very mission driven. They want to mentor and train students and see you guys succeed. So that's why I encourage you guys to talk to your faculty. And then the students are, Northridge is one of the larger Cal States, even larger than Cal State LA. So just the sheer number of students that, come from adversity. They're pushing through adversity, and to give them the tools and to see them succeed. I've been here for 5 years now, so I'm starting to see some of my graduates go on to get great jobs and get into great graduate programs. So that's the ultimate return on investment, to steal a finance term. But yeah, I think that's the greatest thing. So for me,
I think a lot of the management responsibilities I had at my former job were some of my least favorite responsibilities. Forecasting project budgets and revenue, and just over and over and over again, it seemed like every 2 to 4 weeks, our upper management wanted us to revise our forecasts and update them, and it just was tedious and old, and so that was not enjoyable. I really, I wanted to do the science. I wanted to, investigate locations, drill holes, come up with conceptual site models. I wanted to do the actual work and not the administrative tasks that came along with management responsibilities.
So, moving on, are there any common misconceptions about your work?
Everyone always asks if we're drilling for gold or oil. 99% of the time, if we've got a rig on site, everyone asks, "Oh, you guys find any oil yet?" I think a lot of people don't realize that, almost wherever you're at, groundwater is below you, whether it's 10 feet below you, 50 feet, 500 feet. And that's usually what we're targeting to investigate and characterize. So that's probably the biggest thing.
I can tell you in finance, you need to reach a certain level of competency in order to be qualified. But beyond that, being smarter doesn't really help that much. And then now that I've worked in the commercial real estate world, I can tell you that people who work in commercial real estate are basically the people who are not smart enough to work in finance. So I think there's like this vision of people who are like working in banking or doing these high finance jobs, like for smart people. And there are like a lot of smart people out there, but there are also a lot of people who are just like not. There's no connection between like what people get paid and how indulgent there are. There just isn't, and it's shocking and frustrating, but you kind of just have to accept it. So yeah, the world's not a fair place.
Does Tori say the same stuff?
I think she would agree with me.
We need to get like a bunch of you finance people in the room and just like go, these knuckleheads.
You mean all three of us?
Okay, I guess I should answer the question. We're not always doing Stranger Things.
Sometimes you are.
At least that's what I have to say. But we're more often than not, like what we're doing is really just, all of us could have chosen to do research or do the kind of technical work we do for places that actually like would pay us a lot more. Like there's some, research scientists that could be getting paid triple the amount that they get paid right now if they went to work in industry and they had opportunities to, but they choose not to because they really love doing the science. And that's something that I found over and over again. It's not like there isn't economic opportunity in like the research world, obviously, but like more like, there's a real passion for it. And it also is another thing that like we're not all socially awkward. Like we all have, hobbies and lives outside of science and outside of research. Like I've known people who like rode horses. One person even did like archery on horseback, like freaking Merida from Brave. Yeah, and she looks like an Olsen sister. It's very frustrating how marvelous she is as a person and as a scientist. But yeah, there's a lot of really cool and different kinds of people that I find like in my career path, and also there's awkward people, of course. That just happens. Sometimes I'm that person, so that's not fun. But we're all kind of in the same mission of trying to do good research to help each other and help humanity. So yeah.
Wow, it's so interesting. Yeah. So there is another question in the chat. What advice do you have on making friends with people who are not exactly the most sociable and 5 years older, which is quite a large gap for EEPsters, besides just starting conversations? So if any of you would like to touch on that, that would be great.
I don't know why, but I was that was never a challenge for me. Like I would just take the Bio 101 lab and just start talking to people, and they were really like, at that time EEP was in '96. EEP was still pretty small, and so people were just genuinely curious, and so and I don't know, they just kind of adopted me as like their younger brother, and so like it never was really challenging. I think just talking to them because they're humans. You're a human. Just chat and like Amy said, just be friendly and try to make friends and I think things will click when there's a natural on that Venn diagram if you have common things and if for me it was like an OChem. When we were taking OChem, we had group study type things and we just pull all-nighters together, and I really started hanging out more with the non-EEP crowd rather than the EEP crowd. And so I think it was just a natural progression for me. I think the first 2 years I was probably pretty much in the EEP room with the EEPsters, but then I think right around my third year, that's where I kind of hit my stride and found my non-EEP crew as well. So I would encourage you guys to do that as well.
I would just complain about the professor. Like everyone wants to complain about the professor together.
Yeah, throw Daniel under the bus specifically.
Yeah.
No offense taken.
Everybody chose to be in the classroom. You got to just remember that. Like you do have something in common, which is you all chose to be there to learn something. The motivation behind learning that thing is going to be different every time. But like, just focus on the fact that you all want to just learn just that common thing. And that makes like connecting with people easier. And also, people who are comfortable and self-aware with themselves or can at least act that way, fake it till you make it, have an easier time connecting with other people too, because when they hear that other people you're at ease, they're more likely to feel at ease too. Whatever you put out there comes back to you, from my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think be prepared to answer a lot of questions about the program. I feel like for the first few years, I'd get the same set of questions because everyone's curious. It's sort of a new experience for a lot of students to have someone so much younger in their class with them. But yeah, like everyone said, once you get past that first phase, then just start connecting with people about whatever your shared interests or responsibilities are. It really just bridges the gap right there.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question is something that goes back to the occupation or your occupation and what you do outside of it. So how do you maintain your work-life balance?
I think work-life balance is a fallacy. And I think you need to prioritize 1, 2, 3, what's most important to you. And those things may shift and alternate. And so I think, especially in the pandemic, I think finding flexibility and being flexible is important. But I don't think there's a mythical balance that you find. I think it changes, right? I think it changes as you progress. James and I are fathers. I don't know about David and Amy yet, but no kids yet. But I think those things shift, your priorities and your balances as well. And so, I think the draw to academia is, it's a lot of work, but there is some built-in flexibility, even pre-pandemic, that you can come in on a Saturday if you have to do something on a Friday, and you can do that kind of stuff. Other jobs pre-pandemic, I think you had to clock in, clock out, and you don't have that flexibility. So that was a draw for me.
Yeah, I definitely second that. My priorities have shifted dramatically over the years. At the beginning of my career, I was more than happy to hit the road for months at a time, work 60 or 80 hours a week on a drill rig, and just, that was my priority. Get a lot of experience, learn my craft, and advance my career. And now, that is not my priority. So, 2 months ago, I quit my job, 20 years with one company, to reduce those responsibilities, to go from a 60-hour-a-week work week as a manager, office manager, to tone it down a bit and go back to a more reasonable 40 hours a week, so I can enjoy the time that I spend with my family.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like working really hard earlier in your career to help advance you to the point where you can get to positions where you get to choose the work-life balance that you want, if that's an option on the table. I can tell you, it's been kind of tough the last year and a half with work from home, because I like having a separation of my work life and home life, and ended up blending it together. But I think the things that helped me is just having time to relax, having vacations where you really unplug, and getting outside, seeing people. I know that sounds kind of generic, but it helps.
The concept of a work-life balance makes a lot of sense in some ways, but you kind of have to accept that, that thing is going to always be in flux. Even month to month, it's in flux for me. This month is the end of the fiscal year for my job, so I have to put more time in work than I would otherwise. Another thing that I do, and I think this is something that you could hear repeated across, the people in this panel, is you have to choose a position that also prioritizes, that has the same priorities as you. So if your priorities are to put a little less time in your work so you could actually put more time in your life outside of work, then you kind of have to find a workplace that values that prioritizes that wants happy employees because they get to not be in work for 100 hours a week. That's something I had to learn through an internship, honestly. So finding opportunities where you could, just suss that out for yourself, how much you want to put into your job at different phases of your life is really important. And finding places that, would be willing to accommodate you and work with you on that, I think is really key. Because a lot of your opportunities and a lot of your chances are dependent on the environment that you put yourself in. So, one running joke that I have among my friends in the Bay Area is quit your job. That's something that we joke about a lot. But the turnaround rate for people in tech tends to be about 1 to 2 years. 3 years is considered a lot of time in one company, in one job for tech. And this isn't true for academia. It isn't true for a lot of scientific and technical work, because it takes a lot of investment and time to build expertise in a specific field. But there's also, you kind of have to find opportunities to sort of change your position in your research, or change your position in your group in order to help accommodate your needs. And a lot of that just means just asking for it and seeing what you get. And your response is what determines what your work-life balance is going to be. You have a lot more control over that than you think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. Kind of just, it will change, what you prioritize, what you value most. So my next question is a little more of like a theoretical question. What does success look like for you?
I just took a seminar about this. Because success looked so different for me when I was your age. I had, such a rigid idea of what success is when I was, still an EEPster. And that honestly was more harmful than it really needed to be. I think as I've grown older and went farther in my career, I've had a more and more flexible idea of what success is. And so I just recently I put down 3 things I wanted for myself in the position that I am in right now, which is, to get more responsibilities leading projects, to just get more responsibility in being able to shape a community that I'm in and help, the scientific community to be more inclusive and, more fun to be in. And, just being able to do my work in, to use my technical skills in a way that really excites and motivates me instead of pigeonholing myself. So that's how I view it now. And research careers are like 50, 60 years easy. And we got a head start. So, keeping that in mind makes me feel a lot more flexible about what I could end up doing. Like, it's not that uncommon for people in my position to, in 5 years down the line, become an academic and be a professor, for example. And that's something that I'm more drawn to now than I was when I was in EEP. I used to think it's undergrad, then grad school, then postdoc, and then straight into academia. But where I am right now, like I don't feel so drawn to that, like, sort of rigid pathway to becoming a professor at an R1, especially, because I think that's not how I want to live my life.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, success is more about the journey, not necessarily the end goal. It's, about being doing a good job, being diligent and complete, comprehensive about the tasks and work at hand, being a good and reliable coworker who my colleagues can turn to me and know that I'll be there to get the job done and be a responsible individual, and everything that's within my control to make sure to do as good a job as I can. But beyond that, I'll leave the chips where they are, and there's no real end goal or target beyond that.
Yeah, I'm kind of the similar way. Like, just want to be good at the job, and be the person who others can go to for advice, and being the kind of person who gives advice and helps other people. Like, I always take calls from people earlier in their careers or in school, and tell them whatever I can about my experiences. So that's what I did when I was in their shoes, and I believe in trying to pay it forward. And yeah, I mean, it may sound really simplistic, but I think success is just trying to be the best that you can at what you're doing, and trying to be a good person. Help others to achieve their goals as well. Don't be one of those people who pulls the ladder up after you climb it.
There's a really great New York Times article about this researcher named Catalin Carrico. Has anyone heard of Catalin Carrico? Okay. Hopefully all of you guys have gotten vaccinated. Everyone's gotten vaccinated? Yeah. So the technology that went into making that messenger RNA stable and not raising the wrong kind of immune response, Catalin Carrico swapped out one nucleotide called uridine with pseudouridine. And she published this study back in 2005. And, at that time, she was not a tenure track faculty. And she really struggled getting funding for her research. And so she was at the University of Pennsylvania. So Drew Weissman, a clinician, took her under his wing and gave her the resources to do her research. And it's kind of niche. Nucleotide biochemistry is near and dear to my heart, but it's not splashy. It doesn't normally make Nature, Science, the top journals, Cell, Science, Nature. But she chipped away at it. And not only did she chip away at it, she sought her own. She sought to disprove her own research, right? And so, as a scientist, you really want to put your own, pet hypothesis through the ringer to make sure that it's valid, right? You don't really prove what's true; you knock down what's false, right? That's truly the scientific method. And even though, by all metrics, she was not academically successful, she didn't get the top tier journal articles. She didn't get a tenure track position. We are all dependent on the licensing technology that Penn and Catalina Carrico and Drew Weissman have lent the pharmaceutical industry. And so, for me, that's kind of a parable of success. That all what everyone on this panel is saying is true. You chip away at a problem. You be a good worker and hopefully and a good person, and you help people. You help people come up with you, and I think. All in that, at the very end, Catalina Carrico, when she heard that her technology had made these vaccines very viable and possible, she bought herself a box of Goober candy. I don't even know what that is, to celebrate. Like Drew Weissman got takeout Italian food and a bottle of wine, but that just tells you to her personality. So I think that's like a benchmark for success. Like someone that really is passionate about a problem, works at it, and does not seek external validation, seeks internal validation, and that's really something that I strive for, and I try to pass on to my students in some semblance.
Okay, great. So the next question is, how has your perspective about your job changed since you started working, or has it changed at all?
I think for me, over the years, it's become less of a primary focus within my life. Especially early in my career, it was like the number one thing that I focused on and concentrated on. And these days now, it's more of a secondary focus. I still want to do a good job, but my family, my son, has taken over priorities in my life now. So I still want to do a good job, and I still enjoy the work that I do, but it's no longer the number one priority that it used to be.
I used to believe in this myth of this soul genius being what advances science and advances work or good work. That is completely a lie. You are part of a larger system. You are part of a collective that helped train you and helped teach you and helped give you the resources that you need to actually do whatever you're doing. And so as I grow older, I've started to think more and more of life in terms of my day-to-day life outside of work and my work life to be a team building exercise. I try to view people as how can we help each other out? How can we reach each other? How can we help each other reach our goals? And what do we all actually want for each other for the greater good? It's ultimately I think that's how I've started to think about what my work is and where I am. Science is a group effort. And I think that's true for most work that you do. As long as you're part of any kind of organization, as long as you're trying to, even if you're an artist, you're part of a team project to actually make your art. Somebody had to make your pigment. Somebody had to make the oils that you use to carry the pigment onto your canvas even. So understanding that, I think, is part of how I've grown over the years in terms of how I think about my career.
Yeah, kind of echoing a lot of those points. I just think who you work with is just so important. Like, you spend so much of your life with these people that even if you like the underlying work, if you don't like your coworkers, it makes your life kind of miserable. Yeah, I think I think the last year and a half of people dealing with COVID and having work from home situations, it's caused a lot of people to just reevaluate their careers and their lives, and question: do you really want to work a job that may pay more, but like doesn't have a good work environment, doesn't have people who you care about and care about you. So I think you do have to beyond a certain threshold. Like, you do need to prioritize what will actually make you happy. What's the work environment that will make you the happiest? And it's not necessarily going to be the compensation. It probably shouldn't be.
I'm sorry, can you refresh? What was the question again?
Okay, the question was, has your perspective about your job changed since you had started working? Has it at all? And if so, what changed?
Gotcha. Yeah, I think for me, going from postdoc to faculty, I think you see more the working mechanics of the bureaucracy of the university. And so, there are things that fundamentally I can control, which are, how I interact with my students, how I supervise my students. And there are a lot of other things that are macro to you that you don't have much control on. So I think that I had no preconception before coming into this position, even though I had seen it in some capacity as a postdoc. But really, once you're a faculty, you really see all those things. So I think just focus on what you can control. And I think otherwise you won't be happy. So, dovetailing to the previous question, I think success is controlling what you can control and not sweating the stuff that you can't, for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm also curious, is there a time that did you like kind of the starting of your job, the fresh experience, or were you more did you feel it was better to have the knowledge more about your job later, when you really started to understand how it works? Yeah.
I definitely enjoyed being the go-to and the knowledgeable expert person within my previous position. I spent 20 years with one company, so I knew all the ins and outs. I knew all the players. I knew my subject matter very well. So I definitely enjoyed that a lot more than the early phase of my career, which was interesting, learning the ropes. But I liked the sort of ability to have all of the answers at any given time later in my career.
I see it as the best place to be is when you have a bit of an overlap, right? Where you have a particular subset of expertise and skills that makes you valuable and important to the team, because nobody else has your set of skills, but you're still new enough where you don't understand anything. That's it's that balance is one that I really enjoyed, that I've been experiencing recently. Since I've built so much technical expertise in how things break, and apparently not that many people know it to the extent that I do, and so that's valuable. But at the same time, I keep getting hurled into new problems that are slightly different, and working for new systems are slightly different. And so being able to be in that position where you can kind of just go, I don't understand anything, please explain something to me, is always really fun. I like being a little bit green and a little fresh, even though it's nice to, know where you are and know your position. I'm the kind of person who wants to be constantly learning. So always being a little green is fun for me.
I guess one thing I might add to that, as someone who's kind of ended up having a different job every 3 years roughly, it's great. It's great to have that challenge of being working with a new system. I think it's also useful, at least in my experience, having seen how other places operate and being able to, say like, being able to ask questions about how do things operate here, and also bring my knowledge of how things operate somewhere else, and be able to, pick out the best practices. So, one advantage of job hopping.
I really like the newness of the job. When I started as a faculty, like just ordering stuff and meeting with the architect and the people that were going to construct my lab, to renovate my lab, and you're recruiting new students and pitching your research proposal to funding agencies. Like the newness, those first 2 years were like stressful and tiring and exhausting, but and learning how to teach. Like I had never taught a course in front of students before, so like everything was new, and everything was, you kind of learn as you go. And definitely it was stressful. I wasn't, an expert at any of it, but I think that gives you a little leeway, and you talk to your colleagues. You give your first Chem 101 exam, and like half of the class fails it, and you talk to your faculty like, is this normal? And what did I do wrong? And they're like, they assure you that that's completely normal, but you got to give your students a pep talk. And so these kinds of things, I think opening yourselves up and leaning on good colleagues, I think helps you through that. And then obviously once you become seasoned and newer faculty are recruited, and then you can pass along that knowledge and be that go-to person as well. So I think for me, I lean more towards enjoying that newness and being kind of a fish out of water too.
Yeah, I think I become a bit of a brat when like there's new postdocs coming in and I have to mentor or teach them. I love doing it, but I also feel like, no, I still want to be new.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question is, do you regret certain things along your career path? And if so, what?
I think the only thing I regret is not asking for raises forcefully sooner in my career. I would say ask often and ask early. Once I did, I realized that, I had leverage and control over that much earlier than I anticipated.
I regret not buying Bitcoin 10 years ago. It's tough because I my career's worked out well, but I also have to fully recognize that I've had multiple lucky breaks. I can tell you that a lot of people in finance actually have a huge amount of tech envy. I've had many conversations with my former colleagues, current colleagues, who just think that, yeah, should have worked in tech. It's just seems like it's a lot easier, and I've thought about trying to make a switch multiple times. I haven't, but there's some element of the grass is always greener, and there's some element of finance is it's not a growing industry. It's more just kind of chugging along, and then occasionally a third of the people get fired. So it's tough. I think just trying to, when you take a new job, do as much due diligence as possible. I thought I did that with my current job. I didn't think it was possible for a company to be so incredibly poorly run as my current company is. But you lower your expectations. It's possible. So, yeah, I don't know. I think you're going to have regrets. And you just have to deal with it. No one's path. I can't think of anyone whose path is perfectly linear. I think there's an expectation that you go to school, go to grad school, work a job, and it's just gonna flow naturally. It's oftentimes not the case. People take circuitous routes to get to where they are, and it's totally fine. Yeah.
I think with career paths, it's hard to run the counterfactual experiment, right? So like, I think there are certain minor regrets, but it's hard to say, you know, if I had done this instead of that, you know, where would I be, you know, alternately? I think for me, a regret is maybe earlier on in my training, and I could still do it, but I don't have as much bandwidth these days. But to learn more coding, to learn more computer skills. I took a C++ class at Cal State LA, but we were messing around in that class, and you know, it wasn't something that I stuck to. And I think in most industries nowadays, if you have pretty good coding skills or, you know, those type of things, I think it would elevate you. So I think that's one minor regret that maybe I could have done. I could have worked that into my either grad school or postdoc training, worked that into my projects. I think that might have been, you know, further. But, you know, I'm fairly happy with where I landed, so I couldn't point to a specific regret.
Honestly, when I think about regrets, like, you know, I used to think, oh, I wish I was better at simulations and coding too. But at this point, I've tried multiple times to get into it, and I hated it every time. So so I'm gonna call that I'll let a different person do that. I will just be good at finding people to do that for me. Because like I said, it's a team building exercise when you do work. And part of that is just knowing where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are. And my weakness is definitely coding. I do not like it. Like this plays into the being bad at stuff. Just know when it's not your thing. And be okay with it. It just is. When it comes to regrets, like Daniel said, there's no way you could give yourself a counterfactual. But I think one regret that I have is just not doing more work to find internal validation, to find ways to be confident in my own abilities earlier on. This is something that I had to teach myself during grad school through tons of therapy. I went through a lot of therapy during that time. But all of that really helped me grow into someone who could feel okay with failure and could feel okay with like who I am and what my strengths are. And so not doing that earlier on, I think, is one regret that I have, because by relying so much on external validation to feel, you know, the confidence and the ability and confidence in my own abilities, I ended up, you know, putting myself through the ringer when people told me things like, you know, you will never be good enough for the graduate school program that you want to go into. I've had R1 research faculty tell me that. And then I ended up doing the exact thing that she said I would never be able to do. But like it was a lot harder, and it took a lot more work for me to be able to do that, because I relied so much on her validation for me to feel like I could do it. And so I had to really rely on like the people around me to push me to get back on that horse and keep going. And if it wasn't for, you know, the support that I had from Cal State LA to actually be able to do that, then I would be in a completely different career path, and I wouldn't have been able to prove that professor wrong. Mm-hmm. So, you know, find your way to feel validation for yourself.
Yeah, that's so important. And like, even I can relate. I'm struggling with that. And I think it's just like, you really have to like have the knowledge that like you're like in this program, in your job, in the EEP program for a reason, and like you are good enough to do it, and you can do it. So yeah, that's really insightful. Okay, so now let's kind of switch the conversation. So let's move it to talking about EEP. So our question: how did your experience in EEP impact you and possibly your career choices?
For me, it was a series of interactions, right? If I didn't interact with that professor that connected me with the job at as a lab tech at City of Hope, I wouldn't have entered that PhD program. And then while I was a grad student, I presented at an ACS, American Chemical Society national meeting. And at the poster session, professors came and grilled me at my poster. it's my first presentation, so I was like shaking in my boots. But one of those interactions led to my postdoc position at Penn. So it's just a series of interactions, and you got to put yourself out there and make connections, and so those things were critical for me.
I think if you asked my wife, she would say that EEP impacted me by giving me the overinflated ego that I have today. And she may not be wrong. But I think, it really gave me the time to kind of find myself and figure out what I wanted to study and do with, my career. And that was really the biggest impact, was sort of giving me the feeling of that extra time and sort of taking the pressure off of deciding, what I wanted to do with my life.
I mean, I've talked about this in the previous panel, but like most of my best friends are through EEP. A lot of my support network is through EEP. My lifelong partner is through EEP. Like, don't know how that happened. It really shouldn't have worked out, but here it is. I think and like I've talked about before in the previous panel, it gave me a lot of the tools I needed to figure out what kind of people I really liked being around. Like being around so many people that were like-minded, that were smart and curious and driven, and also we're so motivated to be nice and good to each other, really helped me a lot when it came to when I was going through my phases of I'm always stressed and always upset about myself, to finally kind of mellowing out and feeling really good about the awesome friends that I have. Like, I felt a lot of validation from having really cool friends all the time. And then another thing that being an EEP really did for me was I got to be in Cal State LA. And that means a lot. Like, as somebody who ended up going to an R1 institution, you see how big of a difference it is to work with faculty in Cal State LA compared to faculty in Berkeley or in other R1 institutions. Because the undergrads there do not know their professors at all. They are anonymous. You are essentially treated like cattle. And less so when you're a grad student, but still kinda. But when you're at Cal State LA, you are in such a tight-knit group, especially if you're willing to talk to your faculty. They really end up knowing you and knowing how you're great and how you're terrible, but how you're great. Being in that family and being in a place with so much diversity, you take for granted how important that is until you don't have it. And I really missed that about Cal State LA. So I really found a lot of support. And I kept coming back to Cal State LA to do workshops and stuff while I was in grad school, because I just really loved and missed the environment.
Yeah, I very similarly, I feel like I found my people among EEPsters. Just being a very nerdy and weird kid. And yeah, I also a lot of my lifelong friends have been from EEP. Even I've been living in New York for the last 6 years, and still most of the people I hang out with are former EEPsters who are in the city. And yeah, I think one interesting aspect of EEP is that you end up with a lot of your friends are in lots of different fields. Have friends who are become lawyers or professors or do interesting things in the sciences. And at least in my experience is that a lot of other people end up their entire friend group is within their own profession, and they don't have the context of knowing someone who does really interesting material science research, or who's a neuroscientist. So I don't know, I find that fascinating if you're interested in learning about multiple things about the world and just being a well-rounded person who can be conversant on more than just the one thing that you're doing every day.
Okay, so our next question is, did you face any challenges because you were an EEPster?
It'll be so much less obvious when you're our age. Like nobody freaking cares. I mean, it's really, it's a fun fact that you could just drop on someone just to go, aha, goodbye. But like, you know, it's one thing. Like down the line, you just realize, you know, at some point I thought to myself, I don't want the most remarkable thing to do that I've done in my life to be something that I did when I was 14. So like, right, like I don't want to feel that way about myself when I'm like 50. So when it comes to like shortcomings, when it comes to going through the program, some of it would be like I didn't come from a background where my parents really knew a lot about what it meant to be an academic or what it meant to be even a white collar employee. Like my dad doesn't know the alphabet. He reads reams and reams of Chinese newspapers, but he doesn't even know the alphabet. And so like when it came to going into those spaces where like a lot of people already had exposure to this sort of dynamics and politics around being in white collar work, I knew that I kept fumbling. I fumbled in a lot of different ways. So that's one way that I think like being in a place that was so nice and supportive, but also not knowing how to ask for that help to learn about this whole other corner and world of being, you know, in this part of the working world was something that I think was a shortcoming on my end. I think like people who go through like Cal State, like go through UC Berkeley, don't get as like supported and called as much. So it was like a make it or you drop out kind of thing. And so I think I wasn't quite ready for that when I was going through grad school or when I was going into R1 institutions because they were not nearly as helpful or supportive as the places I was in at Cal State LA. They weren't as willing to give you second chances.
Yeah, I can speak like for my career path. You know, working in the financial industry is heavily reliant on your pedigree and your connections. So you know, so my brother took the traditional routes, went to high school, went to Cornell for undergrad, and you know, the big banks recruit out of Cornell. They don't come to Cal State LA. So it's really a different world. Like having met like people who went to like Ivy League schools, there's just like a feeder system. Now it's still like hard, but like you're constantly fighting an uphill battle, and it's very frustrating seeing like other people just can walk into jobs that I had to like fight to get interviews for. So that's like the most significant challenge that I've faced. But that said, to Amy's point about like not wanting to just be known for what you did when you were 14, I've gone like back and forth on like how much that highlight having like skipped high school, and what I've kind of decided on is I take any advantage I can get when I'm applying for a job. So I will tell interviewers, oh yeah, by the way, I skipped 4 years of high school, and that usually gets their attention. It's also like just a great conversation starter, and people will want to spend like 5 minutes talking about that, and you instantly get credibility of like, okay, yeah, you're a smart person. But then once I'm actually working a job, I don't tell anyone. And when it does eventually come out, like after I've been working with people for a year, at that point, I want their reaction to be, oh, that's interesting, but also having worked with you for a year, I totally see that. And that's the reaction that I'd rather get than the first within 5 minutes of meeting someone, they like look at you like you're some curiosity. So that's my take on it.
I think for me, I'm a huge sports nut, and so since Cal State LA doesn't have like a D1 football team, like I kind of wish I had gone to like a Berkeley that has a top tier football team. Like my sister went to UCLA and she was in the marching band, so I vicariously went to many games at the Rose Bowl and enjoyed those aspects. So if there's one thing that I missed, it was probably that. But in hindsight, again, once you are well beyond it, you get over that kind of stuff. I also, my tact has always been not to tell anyone that I've skipped high school, and so many of my grad school classmates found out like a year into grad school, and they're like, "What?" And then you have to explain everything. But that's always been my tact as well. I think it's unique, and for me, the network and the friends, like everyone said on the previous question, like it's such a robust and interesting group that you couldn't put together or recapitulate anywhere else. And so I think that vastly outweighs any drawback or any downside.
Did everyone go? I'm not sure.
I don't think I have any challenges in my life related to EEP. So, I've had my challenges in life like all of us, but EEP definitely did not generate any of them. If anything, it made my life easier.
Yeah. If I ever have to talk to somebody that I want resources from or investment from, I just go, "Oh, I'm a high school dropout with a PhD," and they go, "What?" And then if they expect me to say something witty afterwards, I always just say, "Oh yeah, I don't have a high school diploma. I hope that doesn't affect my chances." Just as a joke. Like, that's really, I actually have a routine for it, just wanted to know. But I usually don't drop that with like colleagues. I just leave it as something like that I tell them because it's funny. Or because we were talking about high school stuff and I'm like, "Oh, I guess it's about time."
That is funny. Okay, so our next question, which is kind of like the reverse of the other question, what was the most beneficial thing that came from being an EEPster?
Yeah, I think we've all mentioned this at one point or another, but I think, again, I'll just circle back to the extra time that I feel that it gave me to really find out what it was that I wanted to do with my life long term, and to what it was that I wanted to study. That was the number one advantage, just leaps and bounds in front of everything else.
I think just like the people who I went through the program with. I don't know how else I would meet like so many amazing like smart people. Yeah, I'm so friends with like a lot of folks who I went to school with like 15 years ago.
Yeah, I don't have like one or two best friends from like grade school. I have a crew of them. And that is really weird. Like, the more you talk to people, the more you realize like having like an actual Christmas party full of like old friends from 15 years ago is really unique and really special to the program that we were in. And yeah, I agree with having enough time to actually figure out what you want to do. A lot of every time that I point out, "Oh yeah, I did this," a lot of people are just like, "Wow, yeah, that sounds amazing. High school is a waste of time." And I'm glad that I didn't have to go through that. So I think it was pretty good. Also, I have my partner, so that was nice.
I agree with the whole panel. Time, luxury of time, and people. When I applied for my postdoc, right after I interviewed, I had dinner with ex-EEPster and good friend Mark Jayed, because he was there doing med school as well. So, I think as the program has matured, there's EEP diaspora all over the world, so you can find someone and reconnect, and these Zoom panels and reunions and Rich's memorial, like all these things have really catalyzed and meeting the younger crop of students that I had met. I think it's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thank you all so much for all your responses. That is it for the questions. And I just want to thank you again, like, so much. This was an amazing experience hearing all of your answers, and I really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to do the interview.
Yes, it was great hearing all of your insight and how there's so much overlap between all of your answers. That was really great to hear, and also your individual experiences with specific occupations.
Yeah, my pleasure to help pay it forward here.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for running it. All right. Bye.
Goodbye.
Should I go ahead and close this out?
Yeah, it was
Yes.
awesome.
And then I'll end the stream.